Hello, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be restoring a bunch of actual garments from the 1950s. I'm so excited. I have recently acquired a bunch of 1950s garments, and most of these need some pretty serious mending. I know somebody who used to collect vintage garments, and she's moving, so she was going through a lot of her possessions and was getting rid of a bunch of 1950s clothes. So that's where I got most of these, but I also have a couple garments that I have found at the thrift store over the past year or so that also need some mending. So let me show you all of these vintage garments that need mending. Okay, so we have a 1950s petticoat. It's super nice and floofy and it has these little tiny moths in the trim on the bottom. It's very cute. This could use a good wash, and also the waist is quite stretched out, so I'm going to need to replace the elastic. I'd just like to mention real quick that I will be leaving the best for last, so stick around to see the absolute gem that is in this lot. Then we have this 1960s fur coat. It has this cool dark blue pattern on the lining inside. I am not 100% sure what this outer material is, but it appears to be some sort of funky curly fur. This jacket has a hole in the armpit and also a hole between the lining and the outer on the neckline. This jacket is actually for my mom. I will not be keeping it. Next we have this navy blue 1950s skirt. This is not an entire circle skirt. It's probably like a 3/4 circle skirt, somewhere around there. I can already see a lot of signs of mending on this skirt in its past life. I've also done some darning on it myself because I've worn it a couple times. But it has all of these dark purple bows all over it, which is super cute. It's kind of tricky to see because they're very close in color to the base of the skirt, but a lot of these are sort of coming away. The stitching is breaking a bit, so I'll probably give some of those some extra stitches to make sure that they're really held down. Now we have another jacket. This is an equestrian riding jacket that I believe to also be from the 50s. Now so far none of these garments have had tags on the inside, but this one does. It is from the company Harry Hall, which mostly made equestrian riding clothing as far as I know, and it belonged to somebody named Kathleen Parkinson. That is the name that is on the inside. This is a gorgeous jacket. It has a lovely silhouette. Most of it is quite sturdy and I'm pretty impressed with its condition, but because it has a wool material for the outer, it does have a few moth holes that could use some darning. They're mostly pretty small. This is one of the bigger ones, and it's not even that noticeable. Then there's also a small hole in one of the seams for the lining. Now we've also got this beautiful handmade 1950s dress. This dress is in still quite nice condition, which I'm quite impressed with, but it does have quite a bit of wear under the arms. So there you can see there's a hole, and there's similar stuff happening on this side as well. So that is pretty much the only mending that is necessary for this. And now we have a beautiful formal 1950s dress. I absolutely adore the color of this dress. It's very Alice blue. It has these adorable bows on the back, but as you can probably see, there is a huge issue happening right here. So this is right on the back. This is relatively delicate fabric, so it's not going to be easy for me to fix. The mending will definitely be noticeable. I can see that something similar has happened on the front, but somebody's done quite a good job fixing it. And there's a small tear at the top of the zipper on the side as well. There's also a small tear on the side of the waist and just a few spots where it looks like the seams could use some reinforcing because this isn't the sturdiest fabric in the world. The hem still looks entirely perfect and the skirt seams look really nice. Now, as much as I love this dress, it's absolutely beautiful. After I fix it, I probably won't be keeping it because it definitely won't fit me. I would guess that this is probably around a size large, so I'll likely be selling it on my Etsy shop. If you are watching this video, you can take a look at the link in my description, and this dress might be listed. Next up is this dress, which I also believe is from the 50s. And it has this beautiful black velvet ribbon along the top. It has this really beautiful pattern all over it. As with most of these dresses, the issue is around the armpits. Right around the armpit and bust, you've got this tearing right here. And then on the other side, the same thing is happening, but much more extreme. There's a huge hole right here. Then that tear even goes down to the side seam a little bit, so this will need some pretty serious mending. The tag in this one is quite torn, but it looks like it says a Jerry Guild spectacle. Once again, after I fix this one, I likely won't be keeping it, and I'll probably put it in my Etsy shop because it's just not really my style. I don't tend to wear a lot of red. Now are you ready for the pièce de résistance? Have you ever seen a more gorgeous dress? Look at this. It is heavenly. It's beautiful. and it is absolutely falling apart. Okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration. I've already done some mending on this dress because it was in pretty sad condition. There was a giant tear going on the arm's eye and the sleeve, and I fixed that already. Then at the cuffs there was also quite a lot of tearing, which I've also fixed. There was also some tearing on the sleeve, which I've also fixed. But there's also a button missing right here and a button missing on one of the cuffs, so I'm gonna have to replace all of them. Because obviously I don't have buttons that look exactly like this covered in the exact same fabric, so I'm just gonna have to find something different. This is probably the dress that needs the most love, and I've already given it quite a lot of attention, but it still needs some fixing. There was also some tearing on the back here around the neckline, which has been fixed, but I can't wait to put that vintage petticoat underneath this because then it'll just be like the greatest, floofiest thing. This also has a full lining underneath, and the lining is in absolutely beautiful condition. It has a couple stains, but like it is so nice and sturdy. It also looks like the zipper on the side has been replaced because the zipper looks a little bit more modern and it hasn't been super cleanly put in. The previous owner of this dress found it at an antique store and it doesn't have a tag in it, so I'm not 100% sure when it was made, but considering the kinds of wear that it had, the print of the material, and the kinds of stains that it has, I definitely think that it's really from the 50s. So that is all of the vintage garments that I have acquired. Let us begin mending them. So my game plan is to mend all of the clothes and then wash them all later, because washing puts clothing in kind of a vulnerable position, and I'd rather have them all be as sturdy as possible before I subject them to soap and water. We're gonna start with the petticoat, which needs the elastic in the waistband to be replaced. Here is the seam where the elastic was put in, and it's actually already opened. I have access to the elastic. It looks like this maybe tore and somebody tried to do something rather. There's a few messy stitches here. So I'm gonna cut those out and redo them. It's just like an inch of slightly weird stitching. But first we're gonna take the elastic out. So I'm going to pull it out of this hole. Oh, interesting. It looks like this is why there's that access to the elastic, because there's sort of this sizing situation going on with a button and some holes in the elastic. So I can put it at its smallest setting, but the elastic is still pretty stretched out and it doesn't have like much stretch left in it. So I'm just gonna replace it all anyways. So there is the elastic removed, and I have this little container of random elastic bits here. So I have this really wide elastic here. It has some really good stretch to it, but it is a little bit too wide, so I'm going to cut it to be narrower. There we go, that's better. With all of the petticoats that I have, I never find myself needing or wanting to adjust them, so I'm just gonna put this in without doing that whole button resizing situation. I'm just gonna put it in and sew the ends together. If you've never put an elastic into a channel before, all you need is a safety pin. This safety pin is a little bit small, but it's the only one I could find at the moment. Basically just put the safety pin onto the end of the elastic, and then you can use that to help you feed it into the channel. This way you can feel where the safety pin is and sort of help it through. Okay, now both of the ends of the elastic meet. Now I'm just going to overlap the ends and stitch them together. These stitches do not need to be especially beautiful, these will always be hidden. Okay, now that that's done, I'm just going to stretch the waistband to make it nice and even. And now I'm going to cut out these weird little stitches and redo them. Okay, that looks much better, nice and clean, and I actually am going to leave this little section open because it's nicely finished. It doesn't have weird raw edges or anything, and it's kind of nice to have access to the elastic sometimes in case it flips or something weird happens. So that's it for the mending of the petticoat. Now it just needs a nice clean to get rid of all this griminess along the top. Now I'm going to move on to this skirt. This skirt is definitely not in the greatest condition, and I should go over the bows and see which ones could use a little bit of reinforcement. Then I've also just remembered that some of the hem needs redoing because the thread has snapped. Fortunately, I don't need to redo the whole hem because most of it's pretty good. There's just a few inches here and there. So I'm just going to take some navy blue thread and start by tacking down the broken parts of the hem. I've finished the hem on the skirt. It's still not perfect because this fabric really likes to fray, so there's just a few little spots where there's little threads sticking out and stuff, but it's definitely better than it was before. I just think that this skirt will probably be one that needs maintenance regularly. Now this bow right here needs some reinforcement on this corner, so I'm just gonna do a couple tiny little stitches to help keep it down. Here's another one that's coming a little bit loose. This is also such a cute design idea. I'll definitely consider making a dress or something in the future that has bows all over the skirt because it's such a cute little design. And there's quite a few bows on here that I think could really use some ironing. They're doing some funky little things and aren't staying flat. But we'll do all that later when we're washing the clothes, so for now, that is the mending for the skirt. Next up for mending is this light teal 1950s dress, and this needs some mending under the arms. I unfortunately don't have a thread color that perfectly matches this, so I'm just going to be using white thread. And I'm going to be doing an invisible stitch and not darning, so I don't think that that should be a problem. If you don't know what darning is, it's basically where you sort of use your needle and thread to weave a new patch of fabric where a hole is. Then after that, I think I'm going to be cutting off some of these like sort of fraying, unraveling bits on the inside because there hasn't been very much finishing done on the inside of the dress. There's also sort of this interfacing situation on the back opening, and this thing can just like flip around and go outside of the dress, and it just doesn't look very nice, so I'm going to try and sort of stitch that down very discreetly in the back. It's not a huge problem. When I put it on, I can sort of just like tuck the weird parts away, but I'd rather not need to do that. So yeah, let's fix up this dress. So that is 3 garments mended for today, but the light is leaving us and it's starting to get dark out, so I'm going to stop for today and pick this up again tomorrow. Okay, now let's mend this vintage equestrian riding jacket. I'm going to start by using an invisible stitch to fix this hole in the lining. Okay, that was a pretty quick fix, but now I'm going to try and do some darning on some of these moth holes. So this isn't the cleanest darning in the world, I'm not particularly good at darning, but it will stop that hole from getting any bigger. And then at some point if I want, I can get a thread that more closely matches the color of this jacket to sort of go over that and make it less visible. And now I'm just going to do this once more on this moth hole in the back. There are a couple of other really tiny moth holes on this, but I'm not really going to bother with them because I think that it'll just make them more noticeable at this point if I darn them because they're very, very small. And now we'll give a little bit of love to this 1960s coat. This has a huge hole here at the top. That's sort of the spot where the lining attaches to the rest of the jacket on the neckline. So I have some black thread here, and I am once again going to use probably an invisible stitch to see what I can do to fix this. You might be wondering how it is that I decide on what stitch I'm going to use to fix something. And what I'm doing right now is very similar to an invisible stitch, but it's not exactly the same, and I don't know if there's a name for it. Basically what I did is I examined the seam as it already was done. That was quite easy to do for this since there's a hole in the seam, and so I can kind of look inside and see what was done to construct the jacket originally. And a lot of the time if I can't figure out how the original garment was made, I just kind of wing it. And despite what you might hear in a lot of sewing manuals and that kind of stuff, there isn't really a right way to do any sort of fix or construction as long as the results end up looking nice. A lot of the methods I use, I don't recall seeing anybody do before. They just make sense to me, and so I try them, and they either work or they don't, and that's kind of just how you learn. So if you're beginning sewing, or even if you've been doing it for a while and you totally feel like you don't know what you're doing, that's totally fine. You don't need to know what you're doing because quite honestly, I don't know what I'm doing. I do. And it just sometimes works out. At this point in my sewing practice, basically everything that I do does end up working. Like, I know how to construct a garment because I've been doing it for quite some time, and I know which of the weird things I've come up with work and which don't. Now, I've just said that I'm the kind of person who likes to experiment and learn from my mistakes when it comes to sewing, and I just sort of see what works, but I understand that a lot of people aren't really comfortable doing that and they're just not really sure where to start. If you're ever in a specific sewing predicament, feel free to email me or DM me on Instagram, and I will be happy to do my best to give you some advice and suggestions. Okay, I've fixed the hole in the neckline and I think it's looking pretty good. Now, another issue with this jacket is that there is a hole in the armpit. It does appear that some of this damage has been done to a seam, but it also looks like some of this material has just been torn because it's some sort of animal fur. I'd still like to do a little research to see what kind of animal fur. But the nice thing with this is that on most garments, if I had a problem like this, it would probably end up being a little more visible. But with this material, the fur will kind of be obstructing all of my stitches, so you won't really be able to see what's going on. So as long as I get it really nice and sturdy and it feels strong, we should be good. So right now I'm basically just doing a whip stitch, but I'm being really careful to grab the actual base of the leather of the material, because if I just grab kind of the hairy parts, it's not going to be very strong. Okie doke, that would be it for this jacket. I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to be doing the cleaning because it does not smell particularly good, but since it's like fur and it's a very solid fabric, it would be pretty hard to dry. I'm just like not really sure how to go about cleaning it. This is probably something you would have to get dry cleaned, but I might leave that up to my mom. This is not a garment for me, this is for her. I suppose we can just put some perfume on it, that'll do. So that is it for this jacket. Now I'm going to start working on this red dress. The tearing situation on both sides of the dress is pretty serious. I'm going to try and use an invisible stitch to close up this tear, and it's really nice that it tore horizontally because then it sort of lines up with the stripes of the pattern and it'll be a little bit less visible. So I'm going to at least start working on the tears right now, but I'll probably pick it up again tomorrow because the light is already starting to leave us again.
Then let your voices ring and all together sing, are we downhearted? Not while Britannia rolls away, not my grave, while we have Jack upon the sea and Tommy on the land.
So here's the spot where the tear is. It's really nice how invisible it is because of the pattern, but that also went all the way to the seam under the arm, which was torn, so I stitched that up also. Then I also need to tack down the cuff again because that seam under the sleeve being torn also tore some of the stitches for the cuff. So I'll just do that real quick and then I'll pick this up again tomorrow. Okay, let's continue mending this red dress. We fixed the tears on this side, and we have basically the same thing happening on the other side, but there's more small rips, and they're very close together. This will definitely make it a little bit more difficult to mend. For this, I'll probably be taking a little bit more of a darning sort of approach. I'm thinking of sort of doing a whip stitch along each of the tears, and that will sort of hold them together for the most part, and then I can sort of darn over top of that to make it a little bit stronger. And then, as we had happening on the other side, there are some stitches on the cuff coming undone. So I'm just going to start working on the tear.
Are we downhearted? No! Then let your voices ring and all together sing. Are we downhearted? No!
So I think that would be it for the mending of the red dress. That actually worked quite nicely. Here's what that spot looks like. I basically just did whip stitches over the tears and then worked my way backwards with whip stitches, so I sort of went over it twice. And now we have basically exactly the same thing happening with this dress. So here's what we have happening. There's some pretty bad damage here. Then there's also a tear right here and right here, and there's just a lot of spots where the seams are quite delicate and are sort of pulling away. So I'm going to see what I can do for this dress. There's definitely a lot of spots that just really need some reinforcing, but I'm pretty sure that this will just always be a pretty delicate dress. I'm going to start with the main points of damage where there's these big tears, and I'm going to do basically the same thing I did for the red dress.
Said Patrick, I don't know her name, but listen here, old pal. If this is what they give us with the old song cordial, are we downhearted? No! Then let your voices ring and all together sing.
I've done my best so far with this rip here, and it's definitely really nice and sturdy, at least much more than it was before, but it doesn't look super nice. It is what it is. But now I'm gonna go and reinforce some of the seams. There's a spot in this one. Like right here, you can see it's still very much attached. It's just the thread right here is really starting to pull, so I'd like to sort of try and reinforce that before it becomes a problem, because this is a very delicate material, and that's happening in a few spots, so I'll see what I can do. Okay, so this dress has a lot of spots that I had to mend, and there's still one or two more spots that I need to fix. But yeah, there's quite a few tears that I had to patch up, and a lot of people would probably say that it was less noticeable before, which is true. However, it was not as strong before, meaning the tears would only get worse more quickly. This dress is probably not one for wearing often. I have noticed that all of the tears are horizontal, so something about this fabric means that it's very fragile that way, but when it comes to like this direction, up and down, like it could take a little bit more tension, and I haven't noticed any vertical rips. So yeah, I've decided that I am not going to be washing this. I just don't want to risk it. It's already really quite fragile, and I just don't really think that I can subject it to water. I just don't think it would end well, so I'm just gonna leave this one as it is after I finish the mending. So this dress is pretty much done. It's taken a lot of time and attention today, so I'm gonna be done for now, and we'll pick up again on that fabulous pink dress tomorrow. You guys, I found this dress at the thrift store today. I'm not quite sure how old it is. I think it might be an 80s does 50s thing, but it definitely has a very 50s look to it. I'm liking it. And it has quite a nice swooshy skirt as well, which is always appreciated. Anyways, let us get going with this dress. So as I said a little while ago, I obviously don't have buttons that are precisely like this, so I'm just gonna be replacing all of them, and I think that that will sort of go reasonably well with the dress. So I'm gonna lay down this fabric and then this little piece of pink on top of it, and then I put the button on top of there, and I'm just gonna pretty roughly cut a circle around this that's big enough to wrap all the way around the button. So there's 2 little circles of fabric, and now I'm just gonna repeat that 3 more times for the rest of the buttons. And now I'm just gonna sew like a medium to big running stitch all the way around this circle. And now I'm just gonna put the button into the pink side of this little circle. Then I'm just gathering the edges around the button by pulling on the thread. And now I'm gonna sort of try and tuck the raw edges inside of this little pouch we've created. And I just keep pulling the thread tighter. Now this part is a little bit more artful, I suppose. I'm just gonna sort of do a few stitches across here to sort of keep pulling the edges closer and tighter to just sort of compact all of this fabric so it's not so bulky. I also suggest tying off your thread every now and then while you're in the middle of doing this, just because we're pulling on the thread really tight and it might snap. And now this is what we have on the back. Kind of looks like a little dumpling, and then on the front it's nice and clean. And now, since I already have my thread attached to this button, I'm going to sew it onto the spot where this one's already missing. This is a little bit different than sewing on a normal button because you're not sewing through holes. I just come up through the fabric and then sort of look under the button and grab a little edge of it. Then I go down and come up again in a little bit of a different spot and pick up another little bit of the underneath of the button and go back down again. So there's my first button, and now I'm just going to cut off the other ones and replace them as well. Okay, the front of the dress has the big buttons sewn onto it, and now both of the cuffs have 2 buttons on them. This time I'm going to be using these pearly white buttons instead of covering some with the pink fabric. Okay, I'm actually quite happy that I've had to replace these buttons because these, seeing them closer, are not the nicest quality. It looks like they've been maybe handmade. It's just a little bit funky. This part is kind of glued on, and I don't know. They're not particularly nice buttons. However, these buttons are very nice and clean looking. Okay, I've put all of the buttons onto this dress, and that means that now all of the garments are mended, and now we just need to clean all the ones that can be cleaned without falling apart. I'm probably going to clean this dress. I'm still slightly apprehensive about it since it's so old and it's so beautiful, but I think that it'll be fine because it's definitely a synthetic material and it seems quite strong, at least the actual fabric does, so I think it'll be fine. As I said before, I'm not going to clean the blue dress. It's just far too delicate and I don't want to risk it. I will also probably avoid cleaning the jacket, so that basically just leaves the petticoat, the red dress, and the light teal dress. Oh, and also, I think I will wash this little blue slip that came with the blue dress that I won't be washing. This still seems to be in pretty good condition and the fabric seems fine. Of course, with all of these, I will be incredibly careful because they are very old garments and I just want to be on the extra super duper safe side. I'll probably be washing all of these in the bathtub and I'm just going to use a really gentle laundry soap and basically just let them sit in the soapy water because I don't want to do too much like scrubbing or moving them around since they are very old. Then I'll super thoroughly rinse them and probably let them air dry. I say probably because I did have this one vintage dress that's made entirely of cotton. I washed it and then I tried to let it air dry. I left it for over 24 hours and it was still completely wet because it just soaks up the water like nobody's business. So there is always a chance that I'll have to put one or two of these garments into the dryer. So I'm just gonna finish here for today with this lovely dress being done and we can start on the washing tomorrow. After filling the tub with lukewarm water and a little bit of laundry detergent, I just let the dresses sit for a few hours. I did put them all in at once, but you need to be careful with this because darker colored garments can leak dye into the water and affect the rest of the clothing. Here you can see how the red dress started leaking a little bit of dye into the water, so if I ever did this again, I'd definitely wash it separately. Then I filled the tub with clean water and rinsed each garment as thoroughly as I could. Once I'd wrung everything out really well, I hung them on the clothing line in my backyard to dry for a few hours. Once they were dry, I ironed everything, and now it's time for the reveal.
Daintiest thing, it was sweet Alice blue, with little forget-me-nots placed here and there. When I had it on, I walked on the air, and it roared, and it roared, and it roared, till it went, and it wasn't no more. In my sweet little Alice blue gown, when I first wandered down into town, I was so proud and shy as I filled every eye, but in every shop window I trimmed passing by. Then in manner of fashion I'd frown, and the world seemed to smile all around, till it wilted I wore it. I'll always adore it, my sweet little Alice blue gown. The little silkworms that made silk for that gown just made that much silk and then crawled in the ground. 'Cause there never was anything like it before, and I don't dare to hope there will be any more. And it's gone, 'cause it just has to be, till it dwells in my memory. In my sweet little Alice blue gown. And the world seemed to smile all around. So it wouldn't fit mother.
Alright, that is all of the vintage garments that I've mended, and I am so incredibly happy with them. Wearing this dress specifically, I feel so incredibly adorable right now, and this will definitely become a favorite in my wardrobe. That sort of Alice blue dress and the red dress will probably both be going into my Etsy shop, so if you're interested in either of them, the link will be in the description. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. I'm so glad that I acquired these dresses, even though it took quite some time to fix them. I'm really happy to have them. And that would be it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please comment, rate, subscribe, and all that jazz, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye! There is way too much footage of me just staring around my room. Like this. Just saying nothing. Because I don't know what to say.